Warm welcome to the webinar Male Infertility, organized jointly by IMA Faridabad and Faridabad Obsen. I am Dr. Vipin Tyagi along with my teammates Dr. Deepika Chabra and Mr. Amit Saxena. On behalf of Jacksonpal Pharmaceuticals Limited, we bring warm greetings to all. For the benefit of infertile couples, Jacksonpal presents Lycored, the cell protector, containing 4 mg lycopene, zinc and selenium. Say no to anemia with Jepitone iron syrup enriched with zinc, vitamin B complex. And Nari division of Jacksonpal presents Cystelia M 40:1 ratio of myoinositol and D-chiroinositol to enhance her fertility. A warm welcome to the respected faculty and thank you for organizing this webinar. Welcome Dr. Punita Hasija, Consultant Obs and Gynae, Akriti Nursing Home, Faridabad, President IMA Faridabad, Vice President IMA Haryana State, President-elect IMA Haryana State 2022, and Vice President Faridabad Obs and Gynae Society. Dear attendees, welcome to the webinar. Please post your queries by text in the Q&A box to be answered at the end. Please note this webinar is streaming on Facebook Live. The recording will remain on Jacksonpal's YouTube channel for reference and promotion. I will now request Dr. Punita Hasija to kindly initiate the program.
Thank you, Dr. Kuldeep Jain sir and Jacksonpal team for this important webinar. Welcome Dr. Anita Khan ma'am, Dr. Kiran Chandna, Dr. Mansi and Dr. Deepika. Hello, welcome Dr. Shipra. Dr. Shipra is Honorary Secretary IMA Faridabad and very dynamic and very beautiful.
Thank you very much ma'am.
Dr. Anita Khan ma'am, who knows her and who doesn't know her? She is a well-known face in Faridabad and a very good friend of mine. And Dr. Anita Khan ma'am, she is MBBS, MD, FACS, FSCOGS, PGD, MLS, and she chairman and HOD Obs and Gynae Department, Asian Institute of Medical Sciences. She is president IMS Faridabad, and she is patron of Fox and a very good obstetrician and very good human being. Welcome, Dr. Anita Khan ma'am.
Thank you so much.
And our second chairperson will be Dr. Kiran Chandna ma'am. And Dr. Kiran Chandna is, she's the president Faridabad Obs and Gynae Society. She's MBBS, DGO, CIMP and FICOG. And she is Director Chandna Medical Center. She has a work experience of more than 35 years in Gynae and Obs. Her special interests are in adolescent health. Her contributions in various journals, Foxy and IMA, are worth reading, and she's a very active member and a very, very, very dear friend and a very noble soul of Faridabad. Welcome, dear Kiran Didi. And I now hand over the mic to Dr. Anita Khan ma'am to start this CME.
Male infertility, as we know, is a very important part of gynecology as well as infertility. And Dr. Mansi Jain and Dr. Kuldeep Jain are two stalwarts in infertility. I've been working with Dr. Kuldeep Jain since I don't know how many years. Dr. Mansi Jain has done MS in Obs and Gynae and diploma in clinical art. She's a fellow in reproduction medicine and surgery from Singapore. She's a consultant at reproductive medicine, gynae endoscopy surgeon at KG IVF and laparoscopy center, Delhi and Faridabad. She has also done fellowship in reproductive medicine from Thomson Fertility Center, Singapore. She has also done fellowship in minimally invasive surgery in Max Hospital, Saket. She's a keen academician and research with special interest in research and reproductive medicine. Presented papers in national and international conferences. I've heard her myself so many times. She has written chapters in books with multiple papers, delivered lectures, video presentations as national faculty. She's adept in advanced OB-GYN and ultrasound, national coordinator, ultrasound IFS, organizing secretary, pre-Congress workshop AOGD 2019, and she has also received the second prize for paper presentation in ISAR 2016. So over to Dr. Kiran for the next speaker's introduction.
So ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to start, and thank you, Dr. Anita Kant ma'am, for such a kind introduction. Over the last few decades, we have seen dynamic changes in the infertility scenario, not only in our clinical practice and recommendations, but also in the mindset of the infertile population. This is very welcoming. For example, earlier, the male partner was very reluctant and hesitant in accepting the fact that he could be a contributory factor towards infertility, let alone getting investigated. This, for a change, is a good, this is changing and is very welcoming. Nowadays, what we see is most of our patients are already on some form of medical therapy when they come to us. But the sad part is this continues for years together in a hope of a natural conception. Also, another important observation is that most of these patients, they come with multiple reports of semen from different labs, and more than 90% of them are not done properly. 99% of these males don't get any counseling regarding the treatment options that might be available to them, and they feel very hopeless. Also, another thing that we have noticed is that most of them come with huge files and with so many unnecessary investigations, which are most of the time not even helpful in the management. A very pleasant evening to all. I'm Dr. Mansi Jain, and today I'll be speaking on a very important topic that still remains to be in the gray zone, that is medical management of male infertility. Before we go into the depths of this topic, there is a very important question that needs to be asked. What is the aim of our treatment? Is it to just simply improve the seminal parameters, or is it for the greater good? That is to achieve a clinical pregnancy. Well, the diagnosis of male infertility is actually very easy. We need only one single semen analysis. However, this has to be done in a proper way using standardizations, using the right technique. A dedicated person who's well trained in reporting the semen analysis should be there, and preferably a dedicated andrology lab should be there. At present, we follow the WHO 2010 criteria, and according to this, the cutoff for concentration is 15 million per ml. The total motility is 40%, RPL is 32%, and according to the Kruger strict criteria, the morphology should be at least 4%. Also, a minimum of 2 samples are required for labeling your patient into any subcategory. So on the basis of this, the male infertility is clinically classified into mild, moderate, or severe OAT, or having azoospermia, which can be both obstructive and non-obstructive. The options that we have at present are medical, surgical, and ART. So you will notice here that for medical management, it is applicable only to a very selected subset of male infertility patients. That is, it is a definite indication for patients that are proven cases of hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. Also, it can be given in patients undergoing ART, so prior to ART, and it may be considered in patients having borderline OAT. However, the timeline for this has to be fixed. When we talk about patients with hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, well, it's obvious that the main concern, the main problem is a deficiency of FSH and LH. So supplementing with exogenous hormones seems to be an ideal option. Therefore, medical treatment is worth trying in these cases. What is important is to identify and diagnose these cases properly. So whenever you have a patient with abnormal semen parameters, as in with severe OAT or azoospermia, the first step is to clinically examine the patient. So on clinical examination, it is seen that most of these patients, all of these patients, they have bilateral small testes, but the consistency is firm. So the next step and the main diagnostic criteria is to get a hormonal profile done. So for hormonal profile, we need LH and FSH. Here, I would like to highlight that we have, when we get these patients, people get so many investigations like testosterone and prolactin and LFT, RFT and whatnot. So these investigations are not required here. A simple LH and FSH can help you make the diagnosis. However, if the patient is having associated sexual dysfunction with this, so then it is recommended to get a prolactin, thyroid, and testosterone done. And we have numerous RCTs that prove that medical management in these cases improve seminal parameters as well as the spontaneous pregnancy rates. So for medical treatment, usually HCG and HMG is given. HCG is given in the dose of 2000 international units IM twice weekly, or it can also be given as 5000 international units IM once a week. And this is often supplemented by HMG in the dose of 75 international units thrice weekly. The main important thing is the time period. Well, this hormonal replacement therapy should at least be given for 6 to 9 months, and it can be continued even longer. So here it's very important to counsel your patients properly, because it is an injectable therapy. It needs a lot of compliance from the patient side. It's very time consuming till you achieve the desired results. And also cost is a major factor. So a thorough counseling is required before starting this treatment. This is our own experience from KJ IVF. We did a short study over 6 months, taking 86 cases, 90% of them were azoospermic. And we noticed that there was a significant improvement both in the seminal parameters in these cases, and 14 out of these patients conceived spontaneously. 36 conceived by ICSI. So moving on to the next topic, that is immunological male infertility. So this is one topic. This is very difficult to diagnose. The tests that are available at present are the Mars and the Immunobeat test. However, both are very expensive and they are not available in most of the labs. So mostly whenever you have a suspicious looking semen sample, you make this diagnosis. When we talk about the treatment, the medical therapy, that is a steroid therapy, is practiced by some for more than 3 months. However, the evidence states otherwise. As we can see, we have these studies which say that there was no significant improvement through medical treatment. So the ideal option is to go for sperm washing followed by IUI in mild to moderate cases of immunological male infertility. For severe cases or the ones that have IUI failure, it is better to opt for ICSI straight away. Another very common scenario is the genital tract infection. So whenever you see pus cells or you see increased WBC count in your semen sample, it's advisable to get a semen culture done along with the urine culture and start with appropriate antibiotics. However, most of the times in practice, what we see is the culture turns out to be negative. So it is advisable to start the patient with doxycycline in the dose of 200 mg for at least 3 weeks, or you can give erythromycin for 200 grams per day for 3 weeks. Some also recommend the use of anti-inflammatory therapy and frequent ejaculation, and for refractory leukocytospermia, sperm washing is ideal. Another very important and very common entity is increased ROS in the semen, which may give you an abnormal semen parameter, and this leads to increased DNA damage. So we need to understand what reactive oxygen species actually are and how they work. So we have a lot of metabolic reactions taking place in the body and oxygen is the main participating molecule. So what happens is that this oxygen molecule, it loses one electron, because of which it becomes highly unstable, and it leads to formation of an hydroxyl ion or a superoxide ion. Now this in turn, it needs one more electron to maintain the balance. So ROS species, what it does is it removes the electron from other biomolecules. And these molecules are your cell components, like the cell walls, the DNA, and the mitochondria, leading to damage. The role of antioxidants is that it donates this free electron to the ROS to stabilize them, and hence protecting the cell components. What is oxidative stress? Well, it is a condition that results from imbalance between the pro-oxidants, that is the free radical species, and the body scavenging ability, that is the antioxidants. So here you can see that when there is a balance between the antioxidants and the ROS, the state of equilibrium is maintained. However, when there is an excess of ROS or the antioxidants are less, so it leads to a state of oxidative stress. Why we are concerned about this oxidative stress? Because it has a direct impact on the fertility, both male and female. So there are various factors, various environmental factors like smoking and alcohol, like metabolic processes, long-standing infections or acute infections, as a matter of fact. Then we have ionizing radiations and other environmental exposures, like direct exposure to heat or radiations, and a lot of unknown factors. So all this contribute towards increasing the formation of ROS and free radicals in the body, which in turn leads to the oxidative stress. And as we have seen, they cause damage to the cell wall, the mitochondria, and the DNA. In females, what it does is it affects conception, fertilization, oocyte penetration, and viability. However, in the male, it decreases the sperm count, the sperm motility. Another mechanism of action, it's the oxidative overload. It directly leads to decrease in the level of inhibin B, which leads to suppression of spermatogenesis. And this, together with the cell damage in the membrane DNA, also leads to male infertility. Now, the levels of ROS, the elevated levels of ROS in semen is found in up to 40% of the infertile men. So this is how prevalent it is. We have a lot of evidence in this regard. Dr. Agarwal from Cleveland has done a lot of research in this topic, and he has said that elevated ROS is an independent marker of male infertility. Also, the seminal parameters might be normal or abnormal. So we have a lot of other facts as well, like idiopathic OAT is directly associated with high ROS, and decreasing the oxidative stress by antioxidants is important and necessary for natural as well as ART procedures. So how does it affect the reproductive potential? Well, some studies say it will not have a direct effect on the reproductive outcome in IUI, IVF, ICSI, with the increased ROS. However, these reports are very conflicting. We have other studies which state otherwise, like the ROS may directly adversely affect the outcome of a natural cycle or IUI or IVF cycle both. It is also said to be associated with recurrent miscarriages, and it also causes impaired late embryo development, but it does not have any fertilization rates. So you see, we have a lot of conflicting evidence in this regard, but majority of the studies state that it does really affect the reproductive outcome. Yeah, so can we reduce or treat the sperm DNA damage? Well, we have limited evidence, and the studies that we have are not RCTs. However, they all recommend that the avoidance of gonadotoxin should be there. Antioxidants or vitamin supplementation might help. However, the studies are small, and treatment of semen infection may reduce the sperm DNA damage. Now we have a lot of antioxidants circulating in the market. However, which one is to be selected, what dose is to be given, for how long it's to be given, so that all remains in the gray zone. So what options do we have? Firstly, let's discuss that. So we have CoQ enzyme, astaxanthin, then again lycopene is another important compound that's there. Then there is vitamin E, L-carnitine, selenium, and zinc. When we look at the mechanism of action of each one of them, astaxanthin is said to be 500 times stronger than vitamin E. CoQ10, it increases the ATP production in the mitochondria. Oh, sorry. Zinc reduces the anti-sperm antibody, and L-carnitine, it works on the sperm maturation. So we have this very recent study from 2010. It comprised of 17 RCTs, and all of them, the 6 trials have showed that there was a significant improvement in pregnancy rates. Again, we have the study from fertility sterility in 2010, and this also highlights that the role of lycopene, carnitine, vitamin C and E should be considered as first-line management, and it has been shown to be very effective. However, the ideal dose for each compound needs to be calculated, and we need more studies in that regard. Here we have a study specifically on L-carnitine and its role on sperm parameters. So in this study, 170 patients were enrolled, and it was seen that the percentile of motile sperms, grade A sperms and normal shaped sperms improved with L-carnitine. Then again, we have L-carnitine and the use in varicocele patients. Well, in this also, in patients with low-grade varicocele, there was a significant improvement in the sperm parameters. This is a recent study for ubiquinol. So in this also, we have seen that in patients with the asthenoteratozoospermia, there was a improvement. There was a significant improvement in the RPL and the normal morphology. Again, this is a study of ubiquinol with the varicocele, and this also showed there was marked improvement. When we talk about lycopene therapy, this was an important study. 30 patients were enrolled, and the results were that 66% showed an improvement in sperm concentration. 53% had an improved motility, and 46% showed an improvement in sperm morphology. Again, this is about lycopene. So lycopene, in this study, it has shown that there was improvement with relation to the baseline concentration of sperms. So as you can see, lycopene is very effective. Talking about astaxanthin, it has a very positive effect on the human sperm capacitation, and there was a study. So this shows that astaxanthin helps when it comes to sperm capacitation. Okay, this again is a very important study. This is a recent study again by Dr. Agarwal. This was conducted in 2019. So he has proposed a terminology for idiopathic male infertility with patients with high ROS, and he has coined the term male oxidative stress infertility. And not only that, he's also given clinical practice guidelines for management of these cases. So it's called male oxidative stress infertility, MOSI for short, and it is a novel descriptor for infertile men with abnormal semen characteristics and oxidative stress. These include patients who were previously classified as having idiopathic male infertility. He has also given a parameter, a clinically useful biomarker, that is oxidation reduction potential, for measuring this oxidative stress. So we did not have such a parameter earlier. Also, he highlights that current treatment protocols for OS, including the use of oxidants, are not evidence-based and have the potential for complications and healthcare expenditure. So again, highlighting the fact we need to know the ideal dose that is to be given. Moving on to idiopathic male infertility, well, this again is a very important topic, and mostly it is seen that many people receive gonadotropins. So the literature suggests otherwise, because there is no effectiveness of the use of gonadotropin in a normogonadotropic patient. And for this, 2 RCTs and 1 double-blind trial was done, which failed to demonstrate any beneficial effect. So it is strongly not recommended. It is very draining for the patient emotionally as well as cost-wise. So it is definitely not indicated. And the results are obviously not there. However, when we talk about anti-estrogens like clomiphene, citrate, so it is one of the most commonly used drugs. The mechanism of action, all of us know, it increases the FSH and LH and also the testosterone. However, so this has to be utilized with a lot of caution, because many a times what happens is because of the increase in testosterone, so this might have a negative feedback and has a negative effect. However, lot of well-designed studies and RCTs are available.
Thank you, Dr. Mansi. You have done a very good job and very concise and to the point. You have elaborated all the points and you have shown us the importance of astaxanthin, lycopene, carnitine, vitamin A, selenium, zinc, and all these things. They were so important for all of us. You have made us aware. Thank you very much. And your topic that gonadotropin not effective in normal gonadotropic patient, it is very important because all the practitioners we are giving some prescription, we have seen that they are giving medicine, so we should be careful about this. And anti-estrogen, you have told that it is not to be given for more than 3 to 6 months, and this is also a take-home message for all of us. And again, for immunological problems, you have told us that ICSI is the treatment and sperm washing and IUI is the treatment. These are the take-home messages I have taken from you. And one thing I want to ask from you, that antibiotics, if we are giving for longer time, for 3 to 3 weeks, is it going to affect any abnormality or count of the semen count?
Ma'am, it helps to attain, firstly, it should be given for as per the evidence, it should be given for a minimum period of 3 weeks. And it does not affect per se, but when we go for ART procedures, so it definitely helps in getting a better result. Because if, again, increased ROS, that is mostly there, as we have seen the infections lead to high production of ROS, and that leads to clumping or WBCs in the semen sample. So even if the semen sample is normal, otherwise all the other parameters are normal, but it might affect the fertilization potential of the sperm. So it definitely should be given for a period of 3 weeks.
Thank you, dear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now I welcome Dr. Kuldeep Chand sir for the next talk. Dr. Kuldeep Chand, we all know that he is laparoscopist, infertility specialist, IVF consultant. He is director KJ IVF Center and Laparoscopic Center at Delhi and also at Faridabad also. He is founder, secretary, past president, Indian Fertility Society. He is organizing chairperson Fusion 2020, a joint conference of H3 IFS in IFAR. He is chairperson endometriosis committee FOXY 2017 to 2019. He is scientific committee member 2019 to 2022 and board of directors also. He is chairperson International Exchange Committee IFS. He is organizing secretary IFFS 2016. He is formerly reader UCMS and GTP Hospital, Delhi. He is editor-chief, Fertility Science and Research, Official Journal of Indian Fertility Society. He has served as ex-professor of Muzaffarnagar Medical College also. He is trained in IVF, endoscopy from Singapore, and he has been awarded fellowship at ART, KKIBF Singapore. He is examiner of Delhi, Jaipur, Srinagar University. He has more than 35 research papers published in national and international journals, and he is member International Scientific Exchange Committee, FOXY, executive member Association of Obstetrician and Gynecologists of Delhi. He is member Guideline Committee, Indian Society of Associated Reproduction 2008. He is author of book titled IVF Technologies for Beginners and Embryology for Beginners also. He is recipient of Appreciation Excellence Award for IMA Rajdhani Gaurav Samman, sir. Welcome you, sir, for your next talk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran, for kind introduction. And thank Dr. Punita, who is actually very, I found her, always find her very energetic and always helpful to all members of the society. So congratulations, Dr. Punita, for such wonderful event and making me part of it. I again thank Dr. Kiran and Dr. Anita Kant for chairing this session. I will like to share some of my experience on male infertility. Mansi has really spoken very well on the problem of male infertility, which she highlighted. What are the problems when we speak of male infertility, and how it is mismanaged most of the time. We know the problem of semen analysis. Though we have WHO criteria with us for all the years, but when you see the semen report coming from the various labs, we find that nobody is bothered about the standardization, and there is the problem. Every lab is having their own standard criteria, and patients who are actually normal, they are being treated for abnormal semen parameters. Whatever studies are being conducted, they are conducted on different aspects because nobody is following the WHO criteria. Most of the labs, 95% semen analysis is done like urine analysis. It is a test which decides the whole treatment of male infertility. So I think what I will like to stress on the first point, that semen analysis should always be considered a very important investigation, because that is the single investigation which is going to really decide whole infertility management of that particular couple. So my suggestion, and I have been speaking on semen only for years together, all labs, they should be following single criteria, that is WHO criteria. So we are able to classify on the basis of semen analysis the problem. And once the classification which Mansi is already highlighted done, we can manage these patients very well. So congratulations, Mansi, for highlighting the importance of semen analysis and medical management. I will be touching on to the fewer newer aspect of male infertility. When it comes to the medical management, we know that only 7 to 10% patients are fitting into the medical management. Rest of them, they will require some form of ART treatment. And what is new, what are the newer concepts? I will just touch a few of them. So one problem when we talk of male infertility is managing agiospermia. Now, whenever a patient, most of these patients, they are very young, and when they get one report of agiospermia and they are told that you are not having any sperm in your sample, it is the end of the life for that particular uh, male person. And it is a very touchy subject. They go into the depression. They don't come for the next checkup. They don't follow whatever advice you give. So agiospermia is one thing which needs to be tackled very sensitively, and there are a lot of advances when we talk of agiospermia. Now the days are gone when we were just advising them either FNAC or testicular biopsy, and that was the end of it. And the patient then was advised donor insemination. Now we are having advanced technologies. I will go into the detail. So these patients who are having no sperm in the sample, they can be really helped to have the fruit of fatherhood by their own sperm. Second is Mansi has already highlighted importance of DNA fragmentation. I will go into little detail how we can use DNA fragmentation in our practice. Then whatever sample you are having, you have to select good quality sperm, and there are a lot of advances in selecting the good quality sperm. So you can give a pregnancy whether patient is going for IUI, IVF or ICSI. Until unless you are not able to select good quality sperm, you may not be able to give the pregnancy. So I will discuss a few of the advances. And then it is not only semen analysis. These patients, they do require some test of sperm function, and here we have host, which is hyposmotic solution test, and then sperm survival test, which not many labs are conducting. It can be done only in IVF lab, and even many IVF labs, they are not equipped and they are not performing sperm survival test. So coming on to agiospermia, once the patient is having agiospermia, I will like to tell you that single sample report is of no value. You just consider it as one report, because when you see the fluctuations in the semen sample, you will have lot of fluctuations. And next, one patient is having one report with agiospermia, next report will come having some sperms, and third report may be just normal. So when a single report is considered, you are all usually going in the wrong direction. So at least you should get two reports of the sample depicting the agiospermia, and it is not only the normal semen analysis. When you are seeing no sperm in the semen, it is not the end of the report. What you do, you have to do the concentration of that particular sample. You have to form a palette, because if there is few sperms, you will not be able to see in the raw sample. So you have to process it, you have to do the pelleting, and then see the sample, and that is what is required with these agiospermic samples. And once the agiospermia is confirmed, then you move ahead. So you have to classify what type of agiospermia is there. Of course, the importance of examination is very, very important. Again, people are doing a lot of semen analysis, but examination is hardly done. So that is again very, very important. That gives you a lot of information. So obstructive agiospermia and so you have to classify whether patient is having obstructive agiospermia and non-obstructive agiospermia, and then you can offer the treatment line. That will be decided on very simple blood test, that is FSH and LH, whether the patient is having obstructive agiospermia or non-obstructive agiospermia. And the options to these patients are if it is an obstructive one, then surgical option is always there. But unfortunately, the outcome with surgical option is depending on so many factors. So all patients may not be helped by surgical, but that is one option. Other option remains is the ART. And in ART, what are the options? One is the surgical sperm retrieval by various means. I will go into the detail, followed by ICSI. So this procedure, ICSI, that is the intracytoplasmic sperm injection, has just revolutionized the management of agiospermia. Before that, there was no treatment for these patients. They had to go for donor insemination. But 25 years back, when the ICSI was introduced, and now there are a lot of advances in ICSI. I will just discuss. So we can help these patients even if they are having a single sperm in their body. So that is the advantage of these procedures. And then of course, donor insemination is always there for these patients. In non-obstructive also, you have surgical sperm retrieval followed by ICSI and then donor insemination. Now, a word about FNAC and testicular biopsy. It no longer remains a diagnostic tool. Initially, we were doing FNAC and testicular biopsy just to diagnose whether they are sperm, but we were not able to help them. Now, whenever we put a needle or a scalpel on the scrotum, it should be done only at those places where the facility of sperm freezing is available. Because you can use these sperm if they are available for a later use. So patients should always be counseled for FNAC or testicular biopsy, and it should be done only at those centers where the sperm freezing facility is available. Otherwise, it is of no use. Just to find out whether the sperm is there or not is of no use to the patient. This is the recovery rate in obstructive agiospermia. We get almost 100% recovery in all obstructive agiospermia patients, and that is remarkable. Patient is not having any sperm in the ejaculate, but you can recover in 100%. And even in non-obstructive patients, it is unpredictable, but you can get up to 20 to 60% of the patients with some sperm to be used. This is very important slide. You can see here, even in patients who have undergone previous testicular biopsy and report says Sertoli cell only or maturation arrest, we are able to extract at least 40% patients can have their own child with the report of maturation arrest and Sertoli cell only. So this is very important development over the years, and we can help these patients of agiospermia. Is there any cutoff? Yes, FS level tells you about the prognosis in these patients, and that helps really in the counseling of these patients. So if the FSH is less than 15, usually these patients, they do have some sperms in the testes recoverable and they are having good prognosis. With 15 to 30 IU, you have to give them guarded prognosis. You may find a usable sperm or not. And with more than 30, usually these patients are poor prognosis patient. But if the patient is counseled very well, you can go ahead even with more than 30 IU FSH for surgical sperm retrieval. I have retrieved sperm from 32 FSH from few patients. So that is my cutoff of 32. Beyond that, we are usually not able to get the sperm, but you can try with various procedures. Now, these are the various techniques. Some are closed and open. I usually prefer closed one first, and if we don't find sperms, then we can add 10% more recovery with the open one. So PISA is directly from epididymis. Then we can get testicular sperm aspiration. Then we have micro TC. Now micro TC, a lot of people speak micro TC, but let me tell you, micro TC is to be used very selectively. It is very time consuming. It is very costly. So once the patient understand, you may have to spend sometime 4 to 5 hours looking for the sperm on the table. So micro TC, saying micro TC is not solving the problem. You have to be expert in micro TC, and then only you can recover the sperm. These are some simpler procedure which usually give lot of result, like this is PISA, directly open PISA. You can directly take the samples from here or from the dilated tubules. This is a video. This is very simple procedure actually. I do it in with under GA, because you have to take out the sample from different side. You have to map by Doppler study that where are the chances to get the sperm. That is also helpful. And then you take this simple butterfly needle and connect it with 20 cc syringe, and you can see the sample coming into the tube and transferred into the media directly. And these samples, they are scanned at the same time, and so the multiple samples from multiple sites are taken and scanned at the same time. So you can see the testicular aspiration going on in this patient, and you can see here some fluid is coming. This is a patient of non-obstructive azoospermia, and you can see these are some of the sperms just after the procedure. And these sperms, they are usually not very active. They are not very active, but even if you are seeing the twitching in some of the sperms, they can be used for the procedure. So this is the testicular tubule, and you have to tease it before you extract a few of the sperms from the sample. This is the micro manipulator which we use for the procedure of injecting. And here you can see the preparation of eggs before the injection. So this is the process called denuding. These are the eggs which you can see here. And once they are denuded, you can see now they are free of granulosa and they can be directly injected. This is the video of the TESE. This is the sample which usually we get this type of sample when we are doing testicular aspiration. So you have to really search a usable sperm. It is not only the presence of sperm which will give you the pregnancy. It should be morphologically normal, and that again may take a lot of time before you get a sperm for injection. So these sperms, they are separated. This is the injection needle. Once the morphologically normal sperm selected, then you can take it for the injection. So this sperm is selected, and here you can see a mature egg. This is the polar body here. So the process of ICSI is being shown here. You can see the sperm at the tip of the injection pipette. You pierce the olema, go into the cytoplasm, just aspirate some of the cytoplasm from the egg to know that you are depositing it at the right point, and then deposit. So this is a procedure which is you need to master to give the pregnancy to these patients. This is very rewarding procedure, very fascinating procedure which can be offered to these patients. Now this is the some literature here. You can see 2011. Any surgical sperm retrieval process can give you a pregnancy. So don't highlight that you have to go for micro TC only. If you are getting a sperm in PISA or TISA, that is good enough to be used. If you are not getting, then this is only in 5% of the patients. If the sperm is there and you are not getting, and then you can go for micro TC. So I always prefer a less invasive procedure in most of the patients. and only few patients we need to open it. This is our experience of 5 years. This is old data, but here again you can see the recovery rate is almost 66% in both combined obstructive and non-obstructive. And here you can see the pregnancy rate is almost as good as ejaculated sperm. And sometimes it is better than ejaculated sperm, because here there is no DNA fragmentation. If you are taking the sperm directly from testes, then chances of ROS will be less, chances of DNA fragmentation will be less. So patients who are having a high DNA fragmentation in ejaculated sperm, this is one procedure which you can offer. We take the sperm directly, though the sperms are available in the ejaculate, but because the patient is having very high DNA fragmentation and patient is having poor fertilization rate, poor embryo quality, and when you use testicular sperm, you will have a better embryo quality, and these patients may have a better outcome. So this is first part of my lecture. Agiospermic male can father a child with their own sperm by the technique of surgical sperm retrieval followed by ICSI. Choice of SSR depends on the lot of things. We should have all procedures in our hand to give the best to these patients. Now, second important new thing is DNA fragmentation. This is again very hyped terminology that we are doing DNA fragmentation. Does it really reflect on your result? Let us see. Abnormal semen parameters, we know that there is increased DNA damage. There is a lot of literature like varicocele patients, they are having high DNA fragmentation. Then testicular sperms may have less DNA damage, I have already told you. These are various factors which are responsible for sperm DNA damage. I will not go into the detail, but here you can see cigarette smoking is one factor which you need to highlight on the patient. Increased level of ROS because of heat. Patients who are working in the heat or patients are working in the radiation, then they are the newer generation which is always on the laptop. Okay. And they are the magnetic waves which are coming from the mobile and laptop, and they are increasing the sperm DNA damage. So these are the factors which actually are not discussed much, but they are having creating problem. Now, we don't know whether the fertilization and embryo development will be, particularly in cases of ICSI, whether the even if you are having a high sperm DNA damage, you can get a normal sperm from the sample and inject with the ICSI. So we don't really know, but certainly if a high fragmentation is there, then chances of getting a normal fertilization becomes lower. And these are some of the tests like COMET test and tunnel test. We are having SCSA and then SCDT, which is less common. These are two tests which are important for DNA fragmentation. Now, few questions always remain. How relevant is sperm DNA integrity? Should it be done in all cases? How you have to use the report of in particular patient? So it is not only doing DNA fragmentation, how you are going to use it in your clinical practice, that is more important. Indian scenario, we know that sperm DNA damage is there. We understand that, but routine DNA fragmentation tests should be done or not, we are not very clear. In our center, we are doing DNA fragmentation, but in selective cases, not in all cases, because you have to use that information in the management. And we know that in particular patient, we will be able to use the that information. There are again a lot of limitation. This is the conclusion and take home on DNA. Existing data on DNA damage, we know that there is an effect on outcome, but it is limited. Treatment for abnormal DNA integrity may be of clinical value and should be individualized. Like Mansi has highlighted, if the patient is having severe pyospermia or there is a lot of infection, you have to treat that, and that sample will improve. So you have to individualize. Antioxidant role is there, but how much is to be given, how long it is to be given. At least we should have 2 to 3 months of antioxidant therapy before we get a better sample, a better fertilization rate. So all our patients who are going for IVF or ICSI or even for IUI, we usually tend to, because you are not going to do DNA fragmentation in all cases. You are not going to do ROS in all cases. So it is suggested, like lycopene I have been using for a very long period. They are very effective, but we don't use cocktail. There are a lot of preparation who are having 5 antioxidants. Usually we don't recommend the cocktail. If you are using vitamin E, lycopene solely, then you are certainly going to get a better result. Now, third thing is choosing the best quality sperm, because that is ultimate. You are going to do ICSI, but all sample, all sperms, they are defective. How you are going to choose it? This is a advance. We are doing physiological ICSI, that is PICSI. Again, it needs to be not to be done in all cases. But when you are having a very high level of DNA fragmentation, when you are getting repeatedly poor quality embryos, patient doesn't want a donor insemination, you are having very poor sample, then this PICSI may be helpful. PICSI is just is a coated hyaluronate dish where the good quality sperm, they bind to the hyaluronate line, and from there you can pick up the sample. So this is one advance for very defective, highly defective sample. Then there is microfluidic, which is again a device which is supposed to be getting a better sample. Like you put the sample here and fresh media here, they by capillary action they travel, good quality sperm, they travel on this side, and other sample goes on that side. So this is how the microfluidic, but there is not enough data at present that microfluidic is just will do wonders. So again, you have to choose the technology in right perspective. Then there is IMSI. Again, this is a advancement over ICSI. Here what we are doing, morphologically selected sperm injection. We know that morphology, if it is very, very poor, then fertilization rate and embryo quality will be countered. So we can see the morphology at 6,000 enlarged size. So we can actually see the acrosome, post-acrosomal lamina, mitochondria, and we can find a good quality sperm for injection. So it is a promising method, but again, it is not feasible to do IMSI in all cases. So you have to be very selective. What are the patients we are doing IMSI like severe oligospermia, where you are having only 1 to 2 sperms and they are not looking good, teratogenic, PISA and TISA samples. So these are some of the patients who may be helped by IMSI. Now this is how the IMSI sperm look. You can see the acrosome here, and then you can see the shape when they are moving in different direction. You can see the where the tail is attached, and this is 6,000 to 10,000 magnification. So you can select the sperms, like you can see the vacuole. Vacuole is one thing which is usually you are not able to see even in ICSI. So these are the sperms which you can select, the good quality sperms by IMSI, and they can be used. Now this is one study, the importance of vacuole. If you are having no vacuole, you will have a good blastocyst in 56% of the cases. If there are two small vacuole, 61%. And when you are having a large vacuole, usually there is no blastocyst formation. there will be fertilization, there will be cleavage, but blastocyst will not be there, and patient will not get the pregnancy. Again, pregnancy rate, when there is no vacuole, pregnancy rate is 60%. When there is large vacuole, you have injected, you will have less than 25% pregnancy rate, and abortion rate is very high in these patients. So there the IMSI role is there. So when the patient is having recurrent abortion and you are not able to find out any other cause, go for IMSI, go for DNA fragmentation, you will get a better result. So like this is one study where IMSI scores over ICSI in repeated ICSI failure. So IMSI is again one advance which can be used to give a better pregnancy rate in selected group of patients. And finally, these are sperm function tests which are again new and should be used properly. Like host is very simple test. If you are having a more than 60% host, it is useful for fertilization potential. When you are having all sperms immotile, there are millions of sperms available, but all are immotile. You can use host, select the sperm by host and do the ICSI. Then there is again a sperm survival test, which is very, very good test. It is indigenously grown. We can select a sample. If the patient is having moderate azoospermia, moderate oligospermia, patient has gone for 3 cycles of IUI, not conceiving. Why? Because sperm survival is not there inside the body. So you can do it in vitro and find out whether this patient should go for ICSI or IVF. Because if a poor sperm survival test is there, even this patient is going to fail for IVF. And then these patients, they even if they are having a good count, they should be going for ICSI rather than going for IUI or IVF. So these are some of the new advancements which we have been using routinely in our lab and trying to give the advantage of these technologies in getting the good outcome to all these patients who are actually very young. They are not having much problem. They are having very good build. They are coming from good families. But finally, they want their own sperms. And these are the technologies which can be used for giving them fatherhood. So with this, I will close here. I hope I have tried to highlight the importance of semen analysis. This is very important. This should be done in a dedicated lab because whole treatment is based on the semen analysis. So it should not be used as a just any other investigation. And whenever you are advising any FNAC or testicular biopsy, you should always see that that is stored for further use. Use of various technologies, again, very, very important. Of course, they cannot be done at all places, but my purpose of discussing all these, that the patient is coming to any one of us primarily, and if we know that these are the techniques which are available to that particular patient, they can be really helped. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I will be happy to answer any queries on medical management or any queries on this subject or any other subject. I will be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Sir. Excellent, sir. There are questions in the question box.
Yeah.
Dr. Deepika, you will coordinate with these questions.
There is Dr. Shivani Goswami asking 36-year-old male with testosterone 150 mg with FSH, LH, PRL, TSH being normal. How to proceed? HSA not done, medical history not significant.
Well, firstly, for this patient, I would like to know a couple of things like the duration of infertility and also the female partner, what is her history, and like she said, the HSA is not mentioned. So firstly, we need to do the basic, like I said in my lecture, semen analysis is the single most important investigation that is required for labeling a patient as male, having male infertility. So firstly, there should be a thorough examination of both the husband and the wife. For the husband, first get a semen analysis done, and then accordingly classify your patient into the required subcategories. And here, like I highlighted, we also need to examine the female partner. Like most of the times in our OPD, most of the patients having male infertility usually point out that I will get myself treated first and then I will bring the wife or whatever. So it really does not work like that way, because if the female partner is also having some inherent pathology, so the line of treatment will be decided according to that. So whenever we talk of infertility, it is always the male and the female partner together, and they have to be evaluated sequentially together.
Then we go to the next question. That's Dr. Lakshmi Shankar Narayanan. If the semen is a thick coagulum that cannot be thinned out, what is to be done?
Actually, I think this is a very common problem. Almost 40% of the samples, they will be having very viscous consistency. They will fail to liquefy, and these samples, they need to be processed accordingly in the lab. Very simple technique is if the semen is thick, viscous, and is not liquefying, that is the only problem, liquefaction problem, and that is because of the accessory gland infection and other thing. So you have to treat the infection in these patients. Many patients, they will have a better liquefaction time. Even after antibiotic, the patient is not having improvement, then just take the sample, wait for 30 minutes. If it is not liquefied properly, you take the pasture pipette, take the sample into the pasture pipette, release it on the base of the container 5-6 times. When you do this procedure, this will be liquefied. If it is not liquefied, again, you can pass the sample through a very thin 26 gauge needle. It will be liquefied. If it is not liquefied, again, you can put chymotrypsin in the semen sample. That will help in liquefaction. So these are various methods by which we can process these sample. So all these patients, they should be, again, these samples, they should be processed in an andrology lab, so we can do all these procedures.
There are two more questions by Dr. Lakshmi. I have put Dr. Lakshmi on unmute if she wants to speak. The one question is, kindly elaborate on the use of letrozole and anastrozole, please. And the other question is, do you go for microsurgical procedures for obstructive azoospermia, sir?
I am not a surgeon, so I don't do microsurgical procedure like VEA. But as I have told you, that obstructive azoospermia, that is one option. And if you are having a good expertise, certainly the patient can be offered. But what happens most of the time, the recovery rate is not that good. So if it is done properly, VEA might work. But if not, then certainly the ICSI is the answer in all these patients. So they can be offered. And what we do when we are doing anastomotic procedure, microsurgical procedure, we usually try to collect the sample and freeze. So even if your BEA is not working, then you are having a backup, and that sample can be used for ICSI.
It works on the same principle like clomiphene citrate. That is it. It is an anti-estrogen. Both are aromatase inhibitors, and they inhibit the estrogen. And it's speculated to increase the testosterone in return, which leads to spermatogenesis. However, we do have some studies, limited studies, where it has been used. However, again, I would like to highlight, as for clomiphene citrate, the duration should not be more than 3 to 6 months. And when you talk about letrozole per se, it can be used, but again, we do not have enough data to support.
So in the chat box, we have Dr. Pramod. He wanted to ask, what is the minimum time interval between two samples in azoospermia?
It should be at least a minimum of 7 days, and more importantly, the abstinence period should be 2 to 3 days, not more than that. Otherwise, you will not get a good sample. So between two samples, it should be 7 days, and for each sample, abstinence of 2 to 3 days, not more than that.
Basically, they are the recommendation like 7 days or 15 days. There has been debate. So many people they go for 2 weeks interval, and that is widely practiced. So because 7 days initial there was suggestion, but if suppose the patient is having a mild fever or something like viral fever, that will go unnoticed, and if you do it too early, then that might be problematic. So it is always suggested that 2 weeks, and that is now widely practiced. So 2 weeks between two samples.
So Dr. Pramod, if you want to speak up, you are unmuted right now. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. My query is answered.
All right. Another question by Dr. Ridha Jain. She wants to know what should be our management if the semen analysis shows agglutination of sperms.
Nancy, you would like to take?
It's indicative of either if there's an infection or it may indicate immunological male infertility. So it is ideal you get a culture done, and like a semen culture and a urine culture. If the culture comes out to be positive, start on the antibiotics. Most of the times it's going to come negative. So still, like I said, you start him on doxycycline or erythromycin. And if it's an immunological, you have to keep a high suspicion of index for immunological infertility. So in that case, like I said, if the semen parameters are normal, so you can go for IUI. You should be going for IUI. And if the parameters are severely deranged, so go for XC straight away.
Okay, Dr. Lakshmi also wants to know, while examining males, is a female nurse enough medico-legally, or is a male attendant needed?
If basically there are two things. If a male doctor is examining, you don't require a female attendant there. But if a female doctor is examining, another person, whether it is female or male, should be available to witness, because these are some of the medico-legal problems which might arise. So to avoid any medico-legal problem, these things they should be.
So actually, a female nurse is also enough. No need for a male attendant.
Any third person who can witness the event should be good enough.
There are a couple of questions by Dr. Geeta Juneja. Patient 27 years with testosterone level of 44 mg%, azoospermia, FSH 13.5. How to proceed? All male secondary sexual characters normal, bilateral testes a little small.
Yeah, that is what so probably this patient, because it is borderline FSH increase, so this patient is probably and as you said, that smaller testicular size is there. So once you are having a small testes with increase in FSH, you have to classify this patient as non-obstructive azoospermia. And for non-obstructive azoospermia, there is no therapy, no medication will help in these patients. Only medication, if the sperm is available there, antioxidant might help. But because you are going to retrieve the sperm from this patient, so this patient will require a lot of counseling, what procedure you are going to do, and if the sperms are retrieved, then how they will be used. So once the patient understands the procedure of ICSI, because the cost factor will come, you have to discuss the cost factor. Otherwise, if the patient is comfortable with the cost and the procedure, you can directly go for testicular sperm extraction in this patient. whether open, whether closed, or whether micro TC, you can decide on the basis of your expertise and your experience. But certainly this patient can be helped by surgical sperm retrieval followed by ICSI. Other alternative in this patient, if you don't get a morphologically normal sperm from this patient, you have to offer this patient a alternative as donor insemination.
So one more question is there. Are we getting any certificate or attendance for this webinar? This is most useful webinar.
Yes,
Dr. Lakshmi has asked this question.
Dr. Deepika will arrange the certificate.
Okay.
Yes,
And
yes.
IMA Faridabad, Dr. Punita Asija is there. So when she is
Okay.
certifying that the
Right.
person has attended, that is more than enough.
Yes.
Right. So it's with your recommendation that these certificates are going to be issued.
Yes, yes.
Dr.
yes.
Punita Hasija has given her consent for it. Okay, there is one Dr. Professor Sanu Dali who always joins us from Kathmandu. Again, today she is congratulating you, sir, for an excellent, informative and educational presentation and very nice videos of the procedures. This is our Professor Sanu Dali.
Thank you, Professor. I will be happy to interact with you whenever you want, and we can really share our experience. Thank you.
And the recordings will be remaining on our Facebook channel of Jagsonpal Pharmaceuticals. I just shared this link in the chat. I will share it again. And also there is Jagsonpal Medical Insights, our YouTube channel, in which the recording will remain. So we look forward to having you revisit these recordings if required. One question we have left out is Dr. Jyoti Shah. She says, whether surgical treatment of varicocele helps in improving sperm count.
Again, very, very good question. Varicocele has always been in debate. Whether even for diagnosis, now we are having ultrasound in every nook and corner, and most of the patients of male infertility, they are coming with a ultrasound showing a varicocele. I think that is the most misuse of the technology. There is not much indication of getting a ultrasound done for varicocele, and the recommendation is if it is a clinically palpable varicocele, then only it needs to be operated. So that is number one. Even if you are finding a varicocele on ultrasound, it should be clinically palpable, then only you are going to operate. There are very clear-cut indication of varicocele surgery. The seminal parameters should be abnormal. Patient should be infertile. There should not be any female factor in that patient. And last thing is when the testicular size is getting affected. So these four things needs to be there before you consider varicocele surgery. Certainly varicocele surgery may be helpful in improving the count, but we are not looking on the count only. Even after varicocelectomy, patient may require a ART procedure. So you need to counsel the patient before you put a scalpel or knife on the scrotum.
Dr. Ridha Jain, she's asking what should be done if DNA fragmentation shows moderate fragmentation in case of recurrent abortions probably.
Nancy, you would like to take?
Sorry, I did not listen to the question.
Yeah, that's the last question in the chat box. What should be done if DNA fragmentation shows moderate fragmentation in a case of recurrent abortions?
Well, has this patient received any ART procedure earlier? That is one thing I'd like to know. Otherwise, also we give her empirical treatment. We start her on we start the male patient on antibiotics and prescribe an antioxidant. And since it's a case of RPL, we have to investigate for the other causes like APLA. We have to get the APLA profile done. Well, that's one very common finding in patients with RPL that we see in our practice these days, and also the other causes that might be there for RPL. And we have to advise her for some ART procedure. We depending on the other parameters, like if the tubal factor and everything is fine, so we can go for IUI. And if the semen is mild to moderate, so we have to go for IUI. If there's any other problem, then we have to deal
Of
with
course, there is a role of antioxidant in these patients. So as Mansi has said, that you have to rule out other causes, and if there is any other cause for RPL, because this mild increase in the DNA fragmentation may not be only cause for recurrent abortion. So you have to exclude other causes and then treat accordingly antioxidant and other ART procedures.
I think we come to the end of this session now.
Very, very informative. I think Dr. Kiran Didi can give vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Mansi. Thank you, Dr. Kuldeep, sir. You have given such a wonderful lecture and we're really enlightened by it. And thank you, Jackson Falls, Dr. Deepika Chhabra ji for this lecture and for conducting this session. And thank you very much from Foxy.
Is Dr. Kant there? I will like to hear a comment from Dr. Kant, if she is there.
I think she might be busy.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Punita, Dr. Kant, and Dr. Kiran, and whole society for giving us this platform. And of course, Dr. Deepika from Jackson Pal and her team is very, very supportive. I have been actually with her for almost now 20 years, and she is always very supportive in all these activities. So thank you, Deepika, for your continuous support
Thank you
in
very
organizing
much.
these events.
Yes,
And
there
Dr.
are more than
Punita,
150% joined. I think more than 160% joined this webinar.
yes.
Yes. So we would like to thank everybody, especially Dr. Punita Hasija ma'am from IMA, that IMA Faridabad has been instrumental in having so many people around. Also the the Faridabad Obs and Gynae Society, Dr. Kiran ma'am, who have arranged for distribution of the invitation widely, and Dr. Kuldeep Jain and Dr. Mansi Jain for actually getting us such good lectures that have gathered so many people around. Dr. Anita Kant ma'am, thank you very much from all of us at Jackson Pal. And just 2 minutes I would like to take about our products. Jackson Pal presents Lycored, the cell protector, which contains 4 mg lycopene along with zinc and selenium for the benefit of infertile couples. Also, say no to anemia with Jepitone iron syrup enriched with zinc and vitamin B complex. Nari division of Jackson Pal presents Cystelia M, which is a 40:1 ratio of myonisitol and dechironisitol to enhance her fertility. So my teammates, Dr. Vipin Tyagi and Mr. Amit Saxena, join me, Dr. Deepika, to thank all the respected faculty present with us and all the attendees who have joined us today. Thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you again. Next Thursday is another episode of the Nurturing Birth series, which is going on. So stay safe and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.